Some of my fondest memories are of my Zadie. I grew up in a Jewish family, and to distinguish between grandparents, my brother and I called my dad's parents Grandma and Grandpa, and my mom's parents were Bubby and Zadie, which is Yiddish for Grandma and Grandpa. My Zadie was a kind, loving, and devoutly religious man. I would go so far as to call him holy because he lived his faith so passionately. A few days ago, Jess shared a video with Reverend Laura and I called Queer Morning Blessings. We're going to show you that video in a couple of minutes, but after seeing it the first time, an immediate memory of my Zadie came to me. In the Talmud, it is thought that sleep is 1/60th of death, and as we sleep, our souls leave our bodies and go wandering about all night, returning to us in the morning. The morning blessings in Judaism serve as a sort of gratitude for our soul's return. For my Zadie, each morning before he dressed and ate breakfast, except on the Sabbath, he would put on his talit and kippah, and he would put on the tefillin. Tefillin are small leather boxes that have long leather straps, and inside each box is a piece of parchment with part of the Torah written on it. One is placed on the arm and the other on the head. There's great symbolism and meaning for wearing the tefillin that sadly I don't have time to explain today, but I remember Zadie deliberately and meditatively preparing himself with it. Then he would turn to face east and immerse himself in prayer. Even though he's no longer with us, in many ways I'm still in awe of my Zadie's daily spiritual practice. I've often had problems praying, at least in the very intentional and deliberate way he did. I often think about something that was shared with me that changed my thinking about prayer. A patient at Abbott Northwestern Hospital, where I was serving as a chaplain intern, had asked me to pray with her. We had clicked right away and had a great conversation prior to her asking, so I was honest with her and told her that I'd be happy to, but I felt very insecure about my praying ability. She smiled and looked at me right in the eye and said, "It doesn't matter what the words are. As long as it comes from your heart, it will be okay." Those words were very freeing. And although I still have some insecurity around prayer with other people, I do create solo moments of gratitude and prayer every day, particularly in the morning as a way to begin my day. Queer Morning Blessings was written by Dory Midnight and Randy Farash Stewart in response to the same prayers my Zadie would say each morning. In very conservative Judaism, which my Zadie practiced, most blessings and prayers were composed in a very patriarchal and exclusionary ways. While the intention is there in the action of the praying, the words themselves can be very troubling and hard to say. Queer Morning Blessings was written to be for everyone. It is a morning blessing to ground ourselves with, to feel wrapped in the spirit of life with, and to remind us that we are alive and that we are amazing. To quote Dory Midnight, who said, "I was moved to offer this collective morning practice, which you are joyfully invited into. You can be on your phone, you can listen, you can watch, you can follow along. You don't need to be Jewish. You don't need to be queer. You can greet the dawn, or whenever you wake up, or really whenever you want, and become present to the miracle that is this life, that is you, every day in the company of these beloveds. These are rough times, and more than ever, we need practices that reconnect us with ourselves, with Source, and with each other." I invite you all to become spiritually grounded each day with whatever words flow from your heart. Whatever they are, they will be okay. Let us immerse ourselves now in Queer Morning Blessings.
It's just so beautiful. Last year, I took a class with UU Wellspring, which is a year-long Unitarian Universalist spiritual development program. I was in the class with other religious professionals of some form or another, some religious educators, ministers, spiritual directors, musicians, etc. One of the main components of the curriculum was discussing spiritual practice. I was so excited for this class. I needed this regular moment of peace and serenity in my life of chaos parenting. I had eagerly purchased the book, Everyday Spiritual Practice, from the UU bookstore. I read it and dreamed and fantasized about how wonderful this was going to be. I'm sure I was daydreaming that once class started, a magical mist would come and wrap me in the holy caftan of spirit, and I would instantly be able to meditate and pray at my whimsical home altar covered in stones and crystals and chalices. Doesn't that just sound lovely? Yeah, well, as we started class, we were encouraged to try different methods of spiritual practice. I tried and failed, and tried and failed, and tried and failed, and tried again and failed again to get anything to stick. What a stinking reality that is. I'm sure that I was falling into the trap of not allowing myself time and space to make my needs a priority, but also my days weren't consistent. I couldn't rely on each week to be the same. Granted, it could have been the emergency move into my mom's house because the house I was living in belonged to a friend who was diagnosed with lung cancer and given weeks to live. It could have been adding trips back and forth to my dying friend's house, hours away, to soak up as much time as I could and help her have hard conversations with her babies and sister and say goodbye. Never mind that we were already 4 autistic and ADD kiddos living with an autistic and ADD parent with a strong need for consistency, but also that neurodivergence meant that we often struggled to make any sort of routine stick without big life tragedies mucking it up. Meanwhile, back in class, we reached the point where in the schedule that it was time to share our spiritual practice. I had no idea what I could possibly share. I listened week after week as everyone took a turn sharing their practice and guiding us through it for ourselves. After missing a few weeks in my shame, I finally broke down and talked to a colleague and close friend in the group. Help! I don't have a spirit and I don't have practice. I have children. We laughed together. I knew she understood. She shared that it had been a struggle for her to find time in her chaos parenting life for this. She had decided on cooking as her spiritual practice, since it was something she had to do every day, and she slowly began making it intentional, talking to her food, thinking about where it came from, thanking the land and the farmers, sharpening her knives and selecting cooking tools that made her feel love for the work she was doing. I loved that. I began to think about all the things I did with regularity and meaning and wondered what I could do with intention. I realized that I was what I called spirit blocking myself by getting so panicked about what was missing and how I was failing at this. I needed to be kind and understanding toward myself. Trying to resist and rein the chaos of my life was just creating more suffering. So I printed some reminders of my worth and love, signs that said, "You're doing your best, you are beautiful, you are worthy of love and belonging," etc., and placed them by my bed, at my desk, in my closet, by the bathroom sink, on the car dash. Some were stickers I put on my water bottle, phone, and laptop. I could have stopped there and shared this as my spiritual practice, but I didn't feel that I engaged in it with enough intention. After a few weeks, though, of allowing this kinder language towards myself and giving myself the space to look for meaning in my days, I realized that something I did with regularity and intention was posting memes, finding, creating, and sharing online jokes and images. In fact, early in the year, I had started a Facebook page just for my memes, since my friends and family were always asking to share the dozens I posted every day. Within a few months, I had hundreds of followers. This was my spiritual practice, my meme ministry. Collecting a mixture of laughter and support, bringing people together and reminding them they aren't weird and different alone. We're weird and different together. I started being more intentional with the memes that I collected and posted, scheduling memes ahead of time to coincide with certain days of the week, holidays, or even times of the day, alternating between supportive memes and goofy memes, social justice memes and mental health awareness memes, absurdity and humanity. In fact, one of my page reviews stated, "I came for the memes, I stayed for the humanity." This became my mantra. It is what I always think about as I'm curating my meme ministry. That page now has over 32,000 followers, and I get messages from complete strangers if I get distracted with life and forget to schedule posts. This reminds me that I'm making a difference. I found my spiritual practice through paying attention to where I put my intention. And now I have a fun video from Juggling the Jenkins on what it's like to parent during quarantine.
Jess purposely said she wanted that to play after their words because it would be hard to follow that. So thanks, Jess. I really appreciate that. I've been, it's sometimes I'm thinking about our life as a congregation, as Unitarian Universalists, and I know that sometimes it's really hard as Unitarian Universalists to feel grounded in our faith because there's no common text and there's no doctrinal statements, there's no preordained sacraments that create a progressive path towards inclusion and salvation. We have the writings and sermons and theology of Unitarian Universalists of the past, and we have current theologians who are called to name what is common among us. And we have the richness of direct experience and other resources that are named in the sources of our traditions. And today's end statement speaks of ritual and practices which are grounded in our faith and how we can live it. So as I kind of sat and put together my thoughts about this brief reflection, I was reminded of the other night when I logged into a program at St. Paul's United Church of Christ on Summit. The program was part of their ongoing Journey of Faith for Adults series. And the speaker was John Gustav Rothhall, who was a former professor of mine in American religious history at seminary. He is an out gay member of the Church of the Latter-day Saints, LDS, or Mormons. In the description of this program, John wrote, I'll share my experience, my perspective on Mormonism, both as a believer and as a scholar, and as an active, though excommunicated, gay member. I remember being in class and all of us just shaking our heads saying, John, can't you choose another tradition? But he is a Mormon. And I was deeply struck by him as he shared his faith journey. He is a person who's grounded in faith with generations of folks in his families who've been Mormons. And as he spoke about his relationship with God in the Book of Mormon, I just could feel his joy and undeniable love for his faith, even though he could acknowledge how it was flawed. I have to say, as I listened to him, it made me think of how many times I have heard us say that we UUs need to have an elevator speech. I'm sure those of you who've been around for a while know what I'm talking about. It's something that we could say when someone asks, what's that? As we say we're a member of MSUS or a Unitarian Universalist. My or our reaction is often to provide a rational or historical elevator speech, a short description of Unitarian Universalism that could be said in between just a couple floors of an elevator ride. But it made me curious listening to John. It made me wonder about what if instead we spoke of the ritual and practices of Unitarian Universalists and the way that being part of faith enhances our life's meaning and purpose. What if we describe Unitarian Universalism by what it feels like from the inside and how it impacts who we are and what we do in the world? I'm really, really excited about what you and the board has articulated as our mission and values and end statements. We'll figure out a way to maybe get them on that welcome slide and in other ways out on our website. I believe that this is a time of new clarity and direction, a time where we can grow to be the church community that we long for and that is relevant to the world beyond our walls. The new end statements were developed to serve two purposes, and one of them was to name what we are and what we're already doing together. We wanted to have a way that we could give you the words to describe why our congregation exists and why we do what we do. And the second is to serve as aspirational statements, guiding our way into the future of greater vitality, interconnectedness, and action. So this first statement is kind of core. It says, in our MS community across all ages, we ground ourselves in ritual and practices that develop lives of meaning and purpose. So as I said, it's both an articulation of what we already do, but then also an aspiration to develop and deepen rituals and practices that will help continue all of us to have a greater sense of meaning and purpose. And when I say this, it's not just as individuals, but it's as a community as well. I know that I was called to the ministry in Unitarian Universalism because I am drawn to a life that encourages seeking and community and spiritual growth and hard conversations that inspire new understanding and ways of being. For Linda and I, the church became the place that we returned to each week, even in our crazy lives, because it helped provide a moment of breath and a connection with others who were willing to be moved and grow. It provided a community that was consistent over time, where we came to know families and congregants across all ages. I can still remember specific sermons that addressed my hard edges and helped me become softer. I remember times in church where I learned or understood something I'd never even considered, that was something that it was influential in how I later framed the world or my inner life. I remember feeling deeply moved by music and the power of worshiping. I remember sitting in silence and grief and joy and feeling that deep connection to others. Being a member of First Universalist Church in Minneapolis and then later at Unity Church Unitarian challenged me to move beyond my comfort zone and to continuously develop into the person I long to be. That obviously continues now. My life has been enriched by being held in a community that took nothing for granted and that recognized that our lives are sacred and holy. I know that these are words that make some of you uncomfortable, but I use them outside of other religious traditions and name them as part of my or our Unitarian Universalist identity. What we're finding in our congregations at this point in time is that seekers who are joining our congregation are becoming because they seek meaning and purpose and an intentional community of faith that provides a home where they can grow and deepen their spiritual lives. That term spiritual is really broad in Unitarian Universalism, and it encompasses everything from prayer to yoga, to service and protest, to breath and compassion, to expanding one's openness to the other or to those we don't yet know, and differing ways of being in the world. The rituals that are included in congregational life include everything from Sunday worship to opening meetings with a reading or a check-in, because we care what's happening in each other's lives. They include child dedications and services that honor our grief and our pets, flower communion, and merging of the waters, to name a few. They also include what Reverend Michael Schuler calls the re-sanctification of everyday life. I think about just even listening to each other's joys and sorrows, or singing the words, "Come, come, whoever you are," or saying our words in the closing of our services that we will not extinguish the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. And these we will carry in our hearts until we come together again. Weekly rituals included in Sunday services are just one way that Richard Holloway says faith communities offer dependable opportunities for people to come together for serious spiritual and ethical investigation, for the purpose of developing fresh and liberating insights and of cultivating a lifestyle that is well-balanced, well-tempered, and well-intended. So what we're exploring today are both rituals and spiritual practice. Our Sunday services, as you can tell by coming to them, include some communal spiritual practices, which we can rely on every week. But spiritual practice on a congregational level goes so much further. It's about learning about and confronting the reality of white supremacy. That is a spiritual practice in our congregation. Practicing that getting everything done on the agenda is less important than having everybody heard and having important questions being given the time they deserve. That is a spiritual practice. reflecting on how our actions, no matter what our intent, how they impact others. And if we've caused harm, to name it versus avoid it. That's a spiritual practice. A spiritual practice is about asking questions about who we are and who we long to be, and diving deep into how we can really be a radically welcoming congregation. That's a spiritual practice. And over these months of COVID, I've seen weekly coffee houses, which are open to anyone who wants to perform on Saturday nights, become a spiritual practice. Each week, congregants and guests seem to find songs and poetry that responds to what's happening in the world we live in. And our first storytelling night showed this spiritual practice of vulnerability and deep listening. Well, I could go on. I really could go on, but instead, we've decided we really would like to hear from you, which has become part of our practice and services these days. So my question is, what rituals or practices done individually or as part of this community have helped ground you in a greater sense of meaning or purpose? I'll open up the mics for about 5 minutes, and I apologize, we will run a tad bit late today, but you can always pop off if you need to. So the question is, what rituals and practices done individually or part of this community have helped ground you in a greater sense of meaning or purpose? Katie just put that in the chat.
There we go. Unmuted myself. Looks like Ali, were you raising your hand?
Yeah.
Okay.
For me, yoga and gardening.
Thank you. I see Polly.
The practice of music in this congregation is completely, it's sacred to me. It's what centers me. It is my spiritual practice. And I'm grateful for Bruce and all the other musicians who bring this out to us.
We're
Janice.
not alone, Polly.
I see Janice Sancott.
A couple things ground me. Every morning before I get out of bed, I do stretching exercises. And then I say thank you for the previous day. And then I have a number of people that I send out good wishes to. I consider it prayer. The other thing that grounds me a lot are, and this sounds weird, inspirational quotes. It seems that an inspirational quote will come along at just the right time. And I found that today, in today's service.
Thank you, Janice.
I see Bruce.
Okay. One of the things that I try to do, and I need to become more consistent, is before I go to bed, I need to calm my brain, because too often my brain is going about 60 miles an hour at 360 degrees around. I can't settle it. So what I will do at times is I put on, and happens to be on TV, on YouTube, they have these very relaxing things, music with a scenery, and I'll put something on for that, and I'll just try and do some meditating on what am I doing? How can I calm down? And quite often I'll say, okay, for the next day, what do I need to do for the next day? And begin to put it in my mind, so I'm not just, my mind doesn't feel like it's on a racetrack. And it helps me kind of center and get ready for the next day, and it helps me sleep better, because now I'm calmed down. So again, it's a form of music, very calm, and just meditating down.
Bruce, as you speak of sleep, I think about an Instagram site I follow, which is called the Nap Ministry. So sleep is important. Marilyn Ravling writes, learning to be in the moment coming to services, either virtual or in person, and plus her animal, with her animals.
I'm going to add, I have adapted that filled with loving kindness meditation to a somewhat regular evening practice. And another way that I, at times, ground myself is with chalk art. So I haven't done that for a while, and I kind of miss being able to draw something on the MSUS sidewalks that I always thought was somehow connected to the theme of the day. But anyway, that's been fun.
Marie has her hand up.
I'm finding that when we go to our breakout groups after the service, that just came to me. That's a spiritual practice for me in connecting with people. I really like that. One thing that I do, and I said this to my siblings when we were Zooming one time, and also I texted it to them, that I walk in the morning just probably 6 days a week, and not always in the morning. And it's gone from just a short amount of time to, I probably walk about 2 miles now. And I said, you know, this is a very spiritual thing for me. And I've always been active, and like to walk and run, but there's something different about that. So walking for me right now is very spiritual.
Thank you. We have time for one more. I see Jamie raised her hand, and then feel free to use the comment, the chat box if you'd like to share others. Jamie.
Well, I've rediscovered cooking. So I now am doing a lot of different recipes that are healthy and not too complicated, but enjoyable to eat.
Thank you, Jamie. As I said, I welcome you to go ahead and write additional comments in the chat room.